The movie begins near the end of the Civil War when Northern troops laid explosives at the southern border. In July 1984, during the siege of Petersburg, Virginia, the Southern troops, mostly comprised of young Cold Mountain men, waited patiently before launching their attack. Among them is W.P. Inman, who left his sweetheart, Ada Monroe, to enlist in the Confederate Army. After getting a ration of winter clothes, he peeks at her picture and letter and keeps them in his notebook. Simultaneously, the Northerners ignite the barrels of explosives, blasting away the trenches and killing many soldiers. 3 years before these events, Inman, working as one of the carpenters in Cold Mountain, initially becomes smitten with Charleston-born Ada on a visit with her preacher father, Reverend Monroe, to the construction site. Though shy to reveal his true feelings, he thanks her for offering him cider to quench his thirst. Returning to the battlefield, Inman awakens amid a desolate plain as Northern troops rush towards their border and strike down their defenses. However, they rush too quickly and fall into a massive crater, allowing the Southerners to shoot them from above. Inman joins in the skirmish but fails to save the young Oakley boy from getting stabbed and trampled by soldiers. After the battle, he tries to comfort him in the infirmary. At the same time, his fellow soldier, Stobred Thews, provides music with his fiddle. Oakley dies soon after. Inman then remembers the day Ada rode a carriage while playing her prized piano, which was being transported to her father's estate. At night, he peeks through the door to see the party thrown by Reverend Monroe. As Ada carries a tray of drinks outside, she sees Inman, offering him to join the festivities, though he declines. Though the pair are smitten with each other, Inman stumbles over his words, fearing it will be hard for her to love him if he goes into battle. Later, Inman and his colleagues undertake a mission to eliminate their enemies stuck near their perimeter. Amid the shootout, he tries to save his friend, only to expose himself and get shot. While unconscious, he drifts back to the day he saved the congregation from a dove trapped inside the church. He then goes out for a walk with Ada and the Reverend as they discuss religion and music. Later, Ada sneaks into her room to open the musical sheet belonging to Inman's late father. She is delighted to see his army photograph enclosed inside. Sometimes during a Sunday church service, the townsmen become revelrous as lawman Mr. Teague delivers the news that the Civil War will happen. Then, Ada visits Inman to give him a book by author William Bartram and her photograph, hoping he will take them with him to war. They share a passionate kiss before Inman gets called to the battalion. Despite the harsh conditions, Inman is now taken to a hospital with other injured men. Meanwhile, Ada contemplates her feelings for him, discussing her worries about the war with her father. After a fine lunch, Reverend Monroe requests that she play him a joyful tune on the piano while he enjoys the outside breeze. However, it starts to rain during her performance, and she notices he does not respond to her call to come inside. She becomes distraught, seeing that her father has died on the lawn chair. At the hospital, a nurse, Mrs. Morgan, reads Ada's letter to Inman, informing him about her father's passing and how she grieved for him and all the men that left for battle. While offering condolences, Mr. Teague becomes smitten with her, though Ada constantly denies him. As she survives the harsh winter at Cold Mountain, she requests that Inman come back to her. Eventually, the young man recovers, but instead of rejoining the army, he follows the advice of a blind street vendor, packing his things and deserting in the evening through the Carolina coast. Simultaneously that day, amid the Home Guard's announcement about shooting deserters, Ada visits Mrs. Castlereagh to sell her father's watch and asks for news about Inman. The generous storekeeper empathizes with her grief, offering a slice of pork to get her by. At lunch, Mr. and Mrs. Swanger allow her to visit their well and use it to foresee her future with Inman. To Ada's surprise, she sees a shadow of him coming toward her, foreshadowing his eventual return to Cold Mountain. Sometime later, Ada reluctantly hires Stobrod's daughter, Ruby Thews, called in by Mrs. Swanger as a courtesy to become a laborer at the Black Cove homestead. To show her dedication to the job, she kills the rooster, which annoys Ada every morning, and cooks it for dinner. Meanwhile, Inman continues his trek home, eating marsh crabs for sustenance. At night, he witnesses a priest, Reverend Vesey, attempting to dispose of an unconscious female slave, much to his horror. Pointing his gun, he demands an explanation as the preacher confesses his sins for impregnating her while he is still married. They return to town, where Inman orders him to leave her in the kitchen. Despite Inman's remorse, he ties him to a post and puts up a sign to allow the townsfolk to lynch him. Meanwhile, Ruby helps Ada restore her farmstead while teaching her how to maintain it. Later, Inman encounters runaway slaves caught by the Home Guard, forcing him to escape through the cornfield. As he finds a girl with a boat to cross the swamp, he encounters an excommunicated Vesey, who decides to join his travels. Suddenly, soldiers shoot their vessel, killing the ferry girl as they escape. Elsewhere, Ada plays on the piano a final time before selling it for food the next day. After traversing the swamp, they meet a simple townie, Junior, with his cow. They are welcomed to his house for a family dinner. Inman becomes drunk and nearly fornicates with one of the loose women when the home guard, getting tipped by Junior, appears and captures him and Vesey, who is mid-coitus. They are chained with other deserters as they leave the home in the middle of the night. Ada and Ruby visit Mrs. Swanger for a scarecrow the following morning in exchange for some coffee and pie. Upon leaving, Ruby suspects something is amiss after noticing her odd behavior, pretending her husband is not home. Elsewhere, Inman and the deserters spot Union soldiers from a distance and call their attention to incite a skirmish with the Confederate army. During the chaos, the captives, including Vesey, are killed, while Inman is knocked unconscious and left for dead. Later in the afternoon, Mr. Teague visits Ada. At the same time, she sets up the scarecrow, hoping to keep watch over her farmstead. Still, she denies him, which angers Mr. Teague as he spitefully leaves while claiming her father's property used to belong to his family. He then goes to the Swangers and orders his men to stab the husband for harboring his deserter sons. Mrs. Swanger is later tied to the fence and tortured, prompting the two sons to escape hiding to save her, only to get shot. Meanwhile, an elderly woodland hermit finds a weary Inman and nurses her back to health in a remote cabin. Simultaneously, Ada and Ruby arrive too late to save Mr. Swanger but rescue a beaten Mrs. Swanger, barely able to speak due to trauma. The following day, Inman awakens and shares his recent experiences with the hermit, who feeds and gives him medicine. As he lies to rest, he confides about his love for Ada and his frustration over being apart. After fully recovering, she lets him continue his journey, packing him with essentials and an antique pistol. Elsewhere, Ada and Ruby discover an injured Stombard getting his hand stuck under the wooden paneling of the corn shed. Though he is rescued from his plight and mended for his wound, Ruby angrily castigates him for being a deadbeat father, sending him out on his way. Before returning to Georgia to pursue his music career, Stobrad tells Ruby he loves her and that she is always good in his eyes, moving her to tears. He returns the following day, accompanied by his partner, Pangle, to surprise the women with a song. Ruby cozies up to her father, permitting him to spend Christmas with them. Meanwhile, an exhausted Inman takes refuge inside a widow's cottage. As he gets fed, the woman, Sarah, explains that her husband died in Gettysburg, forcing her to raise her baby son, Ethan, alone. Inman is then given her husband's leftover clothes and allowed to sleep in the corn shed. A short while later, Sarah, feeling lonely, requests that he sleep beside her. As they lay together, she breaks down, letting Inman comfort her. Meanwhile, Ruby becomes smitten with the musical group's singer, Georgia, gushing about him to the women as they return home from the party. Sarah hurriedly wakes Inman the following day to alert him of the 3 approaching Union soldiers. While still in his undergarments, he grabs his things and rushes to the hillside to hide and observe. The men take Ethan hostage and tie up Sarah, who frantically pleads with them to take her pig and leave them alone. Despite this, one of the soldiers brings her inside the cottage and attempts to rape her until Inman kills him and his colleague. He then threatens the remaining soldier, Bardolph, who is sympathetic towards the baby, to remove his clothing. Though permitted to flee, Sarah grabs her shotgun and kills him. Meanwhile, Ada continues writing letters, unaware that Inman continues his journey through the snowy mountainside to return to her. Elsewhere, Stobrad and his companions camp in the wilderness at night when Mr. Teague and the home guard join them. As they get requested to play a lively tune without Georgia, Pangle accidentally slips that they are deserters. Mr. Teague becomes disappointed and summarily executes the men while Georgia watches from behind a snowy cover. He returns to Ada's farm and reports everything to Ruby, prompting the women to search for the campsite. After a few hours, they locate Pangle's frozen corpse nested under a tree trunk. Stobrad lies unconscious in the snow, bleeding from the back because of a bullet wound. Later, they hide him in Old Cherokee's abandoned camp while Ada hunts for food. Miraculously, she encounters Inman as he wanders along the snowy path of Cold Mountain. She calls out his name, letting him realize she is Ada. However, he feels apathetic about the reunion due to his tireless journey. Upon seeing him, Ruby becomes apprehensive about letting him live in Black Cove, having heard the stories about them falling in love but barely knowing each other. Ada admits her feelings for him have returned, confirming her vision in the Swangers' well. At night, she and Inman discuss their forgotten romance, with the latter confessing he feels broken after everything he endured, which prevented him from writing back to her. The pair ends the night by consummating their love in the cabin. Ruby and Ada set out to return to Black Cove the following day, leaving Stobrad and Inman at Old Cherokee since they were deserters. Unfortunately, the women get cornered by the home guard, having tortured Georgia to reveal their location. Inman arrives, shooting the men and causing the group to scramble as Georgia tries to free himself from the horse. He then jumps toward Mr. Teague to make him fall, killing him with his gun. He then chases after his right-hand man, Bosie, exchanging fast draws until both men get shot. Though Bosie dies, Inman succumbs to his fatal wound as Ada rushes to him through the snowy crevasse. The pair share one final kiss before he dies in her arms. Years passed as the Black Cove farmstead improved and expanded. Ada happily raises her daughter, Grace, revealing she was pregnant after her night with Inman at the cabin. The pair join Ruby, now married to Georgia, and her 2 children, Stobart and Mrs. Swanger, at an outdoor luncheon. The movie ends as they celebrate Easter in blissful peace, with Ada silently reminding herself how they became a family. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this to help the channel out. Have a nice day.